Now, if you've been following along the build, then you've seen us add the Lexus associated accessory product side steps, the Bilstein lift, and the roof rack, as well as adding the 35-inch tires. Now that we fixed the rubbing issues associated with them and have this thing sitting right, we need to add some touches to really let the world know that this is an FMU project. Of course, that means a custom exhaust. But how can we really make this Lexus SUV sound aggressive without losing its class? Follow along as we show you our process for meeting a sound goal that isn't just make it louder and faster. Now, before we jump in, you know the drill. Please do us a huge favor and make sure you're subscribed. Hit the like button down at the bottom and just leave a comment, any comment. Now, it's all for the algorithm, but it makes a huge difference. All right, now that we have that out of the way, let's go find Billy and figure out how we can accomplish his goal. But it can be done.
Oh yeah, it can be done. It's a lot of whys you have me build here, OJ.
All right, Billy, so this car, we've already installed like the factory off-road performance kit that they offer for this thing. And you know us, good enough is never good enough. So what we specialize in, what you specialize in, building exhausts. I kind of want to do something that still looks classy for this thing, sporty and classy. And what I'm kind of thinking is if we did something along the lines of G-Wagon-esque setup with side exit exhaust, but I'd like to try to keep it fairly quiet. So let me tell you kind of what I'm thinking and you tell me how that could be done. So I think we had the LX 570 that we did a similar setup on. Obviously, this is a different frame and it's going to present different challenges, but you had some really nice tips that exited out around this area last time. Basically, what I'm thinking is we're going to need some sort of crossover that isn't this guy going, the 2-into-1. I'd like to fit an X pipe somewhere. I'd like to have the ability to be able to switch the exhaust from running out the side pipes, but then back to the stock exhaust because this is a Lexus. And, I think those people aren't really after a ton of noise all the time. And I think having that ability would be just trick and you'd have the look, but then you'd also have the sound when you wanted it to. So what are you thinking we'd have to do to try to accomplish that?
First question, pipes on both sides or just single side?
I'd probably want both sides.
Okay. And you want an X?
I'd want an X as well. I think it's going to get us the best sound. And the big problem, I'd want to get back to the main muffler with some sort of valve.
I hope you got a long pause button because I got to think about this now. No. Well, knowing all that now, actually, I think I'd put the X right here.
Turn into it right away?
Higher than this, yeah, turn into it right away because there's going to be a lot going on back here. Do the X right here, bring it out over the top. Now here's the thing, okay, so once we come over the top like this, we'll turn them out and go down, right? Mm-hmm. Now this one will be easy, a Y pipe into this. That's simple, right? But then we're also gonna have to put another Y here to turn it into this side. So we're gonna have X, Y, and Y. It's the only way to do it because we have to have two banks going back into this.
Correct. In order to keep it fairly quiet and not cause any...
Unless you want to get rid of the whole stock system.
No, I just think it'd be good to use it in its entirety just for the fact that to say this section drops out and we made a section that drops in, like in place of that. But that obviously ups the difficulty, the construction, the price, the materials, all that. But
good thing is I'm not worried about the price.
This kind of shows off our ability. I think because it's Lexus, it's a good test bed. They're trusting us with the car. It's a big company like Lexus letting us kind of have our way with it. I don't want to just do something that anybody could have. So I think doing something that's a little bit trick will kind of, show what we're capable of more or less. So that's why it's got to be challenging.
Oh, it's going to be challenging, all right. It's a lot of whys you have me build here, OJ.
asking me why, right? But it can be done.
Oh yeah, it can be done.
Now, as you guys saw in the planning meeting, there's a lot we had to take into consideration when we were building an exhaust. Always working within the space constraints is going to be the biggest challenge. Now, this is even further complicated because the plan is to try to one-up a G-Wagon exhaust. And while yes, the G-Wagon, they have side pipes, and it's pretty sick that they have side pipes, they don't have an X-pipe to cross the sides over. An X-pipe will blend both the banks together, and the G-Wagon having one on each side actually results in it having a more truck-like sound. Now, while this thing is a truck, and it would be way easier to just have it go out on each side, it just wouldn't be the best way to make the best sound. We want this thing to be a little bit more exotic sounding, and we definitely want to get a nice, smooth, clean sound. Now, in order for us to accomplish this, we're going to have to take each bank from each side and merge them over before we try to cross them over and come out the sides. In order to accomplish this, we're going to build the X pipes and bring them out into valves, which are going to allow the car to divert both banks into the stock exhaust system and out to the side when you want a more noticeable sound. All in all, this should be a pretty trick setup, but it's going to be equally as tricky to try to get it done. All right, Billy, we were going back and forth on trying to figure out how to get this thing to cross over, then back out, and then also into the stock exhaust. We had some things we were shooting around, and I drew a picture for you of an X-pipe, and when I drew that picture, you didn't seem like you were very excited about it, but I'm pretty impressed with the stick picture I made for you and what it's looked like right now.
Right? So, yeah, it was difficult getting that fifth pipe in there. Easy in the sense that you know what needs to be done. It was hard because the way you had to miter cut everything to get it in top and bottom and the right angle for it to go up. Because off of the fifth pipe here, we want to go directly into the stock exhaust system again. So getting that angle right with everything else was time consuming.
It's a pretty interesting design, but it still stays true to our typical X. You just added a third leg or fifth leg, should I say? Fifth leg?
Yeah, right.
Into the design here. So I think it looks pretty good, and I think because we kept the direction of our X, it's also going to sound pretty decent.
I'm wondering how it's going to sound coming out the stock exhaust, because being that it has the X plus one going into the stock exhaust, and that's going to sound different coming through the muffler. I mean,
yeah, I'm curious as well.
A little bit, but
and it's usually not an angle that we like to come off of, because we tend not to do 90-degree angles if we're doing exhaust, and I don't think that's really a 90, because it's kind of coming off the side, so you get a little diversion here and a little diversion the other way.
Yeah.
But hopefully the muffler takes out a lot of because I think we're gonna hear a little turbulence, like if you really listen, if it was straight piped and going to that guy. But I think the muffler should take care of it and keep it quiet enough to make this thing worth doing, But I'm pretty impressed with how you pulled this off.
Thank you.
So this exhaust is shaping up to be pretty wild so far. We've kind of designed this thing I'm going to call a star pipe as opposed to an X pipe. And when looking at it, it's quite complex, and it was more than a little difficult to make, which brings up the question, like, why do something like this? Which also brings me back to a comment I saw a few weeks back about making the exhaust and making an exhaust to sound good, and why not just build it for performance strictly? Now, when you get a certain distance past the engine collector for the header, you're really not going to make any more power past a certain point, and that power is dialed in with the length of how long that pipe is past the collector. That's it. That's all you're going to have. And it depends on where you want the power and the RPM, depending on the length. Everything else you have to deal with is constraints of the vehicle. And that's why I harp on this time and time again, constraints of the vehicle, constraints of the vehicle. you have to fit this stuff inside a vehicle first and foremost, and then have it exit the car. And then you have other things like, how loud does this thing have to be? How does it look? What does it sound like? You know, we get into all these features, which are really just personal taste at that point. I mean, even if you're building an exhaust for, let's just say, function, right? And let's say that function is performance. Like I just said, your performance is going to base on what you're dealing with, where you're packaging this thing, hugging to the frame rail, not being too close, being away from other things that could melt, and also having that piping deal with those obstacles while still making performance, still making the most power. And again, you could possibly have the performance change depending on how straight of a section you go, how you merge things, the angles you use, dual versus single pipe. There's so many factors here, but really when you get down to it on a naturally aspirated vehicle, you're talking, honestly, horsepower that you're not even going to notice, and it would be very hard to measure. Now, on a series like, let's just say, a Spec Miata, where the racing is so regulated and everything has to be within each other and they check things, you can get away doing an exhaust design that might net you an extra horsepower, 2 horsepower, 3 horsepower. But how many designs and how many versions are you going to make in order to net that extra 1 to 2 horsepower? And there it matters. In a passenger car like this, once you get the biggest chunk, which is removing the restrictions the factory put in place to quiet the car down and maybe decrease emissions depending on where you live, right? That's it. So the closer you get to that section that I was talking about coming out of the collector, the less power you're going to make changing the design. This begs the question for me as a designer when we're coming up with these things is, can it look good and can it sound good while still giving an appropriate amount of power? So sounding good is probably the most difficult part because a lot of people, especially in the aftermarket, think that louder is just better. That something just being loud automatically means it sounds good. And that's really just because that's a marketing point of view, right? When we make exhausted fluid, we kind of have the time and we have the ability from a ownership standpoint to really put time into R&D these exhausts. I can't tell you how many times I'll have Billy cut something back out where we get the exhaust done and there's a drone or a resonance that, you know, even with all of our experience building, you know, probably over 1,000 exhausts at this point, we get wrong and we got to cut it back out. That's happened plenty of times, but that's our legacy. That's our stamp on the world is we know what good sounds like, or at least in my opinion, I know what good sounds like. And we try to carry that over. So just like that mantra, we're trying to follow that on this Lexus. So ideally, what's the point of this? Is it going to give a little extra power? Probably. It's probably going to give it a few more horsepower, but that's not why we're doing this. Why we're doing this is because this car has a very tough, luxurious aesthetic. A car that pulls that off brilliantly is the G55 wagon. And can we get this thing that has arguably, you know, a better reliability reputation to have that sort of presence that the G-Wagon has just by putting side pipes on it, while improving the fact that the G-Wagon can't get their banks to cross over because of the layout of the frame. Again, like I said, exhaust constraints, chassis constraints that limit what they can do with the engine sound. I think we can. I think this design, while a little complicated and a little overboard, is going to do just that. You know, like I said, having this come to an X, the X crosses over and then continues out to the two sides and the valves, which will close it back off and then reroute it back to the factory muffler. That's a little crazy. That's a little wild, but because we're dealing with Lexus here, we're allowed to kind of think bigger picture. more fun, wilder. And if someone said, you know, what's the best thing you could put on here? We have to have an X pipe. And then it's just, how do we get cool tips? Well, everyone's got tips out the back. People do duals, quads. What about side pipes? So side pipes are cool. That's what we're doing. So something for you to check out. We've been doing a lot of these slash cut double wall tips on our cars. A big reason is we like to have something that shows that this was built by hand. We're a small shop, so we don't have a ton of specialty fabrication equipment. And the dual tips is something that we can kind of create in-house that shows this isn't just something you could buy off the shelves. I think they look real classy, a little aggressive at the same time, but it still gets the point across. And duals look better than singles on this vehicle, so that's why we went with them. I love them. Billy did a great job, and they just fit the car really well.
All right, guys, so I'm going to show you the valve controller kit that we use for all of our custom exhaust projects. We're going to do a quick unboxing here so you can see what all is included. First, we've got the vacuum line. I want to say this is like 25 feet of line, so it's plenty to do more than one valve. This is the vacuum pump. So we've got the ports on this side. The vacuum line attaches here. This is where the power cable goes. And then this is an antenna for the remotes. This is that little antenna I was just talking about. This is the power cable. Most of them actually come with a cigarette lighter. What we usually end up doing is just snipping this right here, and then we'll run power and ground, you know, to a key on power and then ground anywhere that you want. And then this just plugs into the other end of the box. And this cable is also super long, so you usually shouldn't have any trouble running it wherever you need to. This is a splitter so that you can run the vacuum line to 2 valves, which is what we're going to be doing in the case of the Lexus. But some of our projects only need 1, so you don't always have to use this. And then this also comes with 2 remotes. So these are like little key fob guys with an on, off, and auto button. And includes 2, which is nice. And if you lose one, you're okay. But this whole kit, you can order from Amazon. It's sold a lot of other places too. Usually they're around $100. I'll drop a link either up above or down below.
All right, so it seems it's easiest to mount this cutout device in the engine bay instead of passing it through the firewall. We'll go somewhere right here. It'll be covered with a plastic cover. We got our fuse box right here. I'm not going to use a cigarette lighter plug because you don't really want to plug it in the cigarette lighter every time you want to use your cutouts, but we'll find a key on power source here, cut this off, run our own fuse right into the fuse box right here. Run our vacuum lines down here along the side of the engine bay underneath the heat shields. Then we'll tap it off or tee it off into the both cutouts. So I'm going to run the vacuum line up over the transfer case. Run it around the drive shaft a couple times. Tee it off right into the to the other cutout right here. Run it up to the engine bay. We'll go above the heat shield here so that nothing melts. Right up to the controller. Then we should be loud. This is Lexus Velcro. All right, let's find a key on power, then let's test it out. 2. Get these loggies on me. Should have cut the wire. It's working.
All right, this thing's off the lift. It's time to back it up. I want to hear what it sounds like. I've got the valve closed right now. I'm going to start it up. Hopefully it sounds like stock, and then we'll find out what it sounds like open. Pretty quiet. I hear a little something in the exhaust, which I'd expect from us opening up the piping diameter. But let me get this thing in a position. Let's see if we get some better sound from it before I start revving on it. All right, so I'm gonna rev it up closed. Let's hear how it sounds. So a little bit more V8 sound through the stock exhaust. But nothing too annoying, still classy. Let's see how it sounds when we open it up. Well, we got here and we accomplished what I was looking to accomplish, which is giving this vehicle an FMU signature touch. The side pipes really exemplify the toughness that I was looking to do with this off-road build, while showing off our craftsmanship and ability to create a great sounding and performing exhaust. That's it for this week. If you guys want to check out more of our content, make sure that you check out our channel, like and subscribe, and leave a comment down below if anything you had questions on piques your interest. Till next week.
What's the term for a five-sided thing?
Star? Call it a star pipe? Pentapipe?
Pentapipe. Ooh, that's pretty nice. We're gonna do a quick unboxing here. So you can see what all is included. First we've got the God damn, bro.